the 21st century Christian, when some of this information comes up, and we have a similar issue, with things like the Gnostic Gospels on the other side of the canon. So, how can we be sure is one of the questions that comes up sometimes, that the books that we have are the right books, that we actually have what God intended as His inspired revelation in the 66 books of the Bible.
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to answer that question. One is the church was nearly unanimous in the decision of the books. And so if you're going to disagree with them, you're disagreeing with hundreds and hundreds of years of church tradition, spirit-led church tradition, I would argue. And so you, from a theological standpoint, you're really taking a risk saying the whole, if you understand the process of canonization, it wasn't an individual here, an individual there making a decision, but it was really the church as a whole recognizing the voice of God in these books. And I would be very careful at disagreeing with that many people. I think the other helpful way to look at it is to start to dissect the New Testament. Matthew was accepted instantly. He was a disciple. There's no question. I mean, there was no issue of canonicity with Matthew. Mark's the memoirs of Peter, accepted instantly. Interestingly, half the New Testament was written by someone who wasn't a first-generation Christian. It was Luke. And yet, Luke and Acts never really had serious questions of canonization. The church knew that this stuff was true. Paul was accepted instantly. Even the pastorals and Philemon, as small as those books were, people recognized that Paul had written them, and it was spread around. So really, there's a few books that cause questions, but what I want to stress is the vast majority of the Bible, there's no question, it was accepted instantly based on authorship. So you have there's a question about John belonging in the canon because the Gnostics, second century heretics, misused it, and the church was saying, well, do we really want to keep a book in our Bible that the heretics are using? But the tradition that John the Apostle wrote it was so strong that it won out. Hebrews had a question because we don't know who wrote it. There was a question about James coming into the canon because he seemed to disagree with Paul, but then again, they knew who James was, and so it was accepted. 1 Peter was accepted right away because it was an apostle. 2 Peter and Jude had a little trouble because there's so much overlap, and the Greek in 2 Peter is so much different than 1 Peter. And 2nd and 3rd John had a little bit of trouble because they were sent to very small, isolated churches, had not been spread across the Christian world. So when you look at it that way, you realize there's like 5 or 6 books that people scratch their head for a little while, but the rest was instantaneous. And so, people will say, well, the canon wasn't closed till 398, and we don't really know. That's just not true. I mean, yes, a formal listing of the New Testament books is dated then, but there's no question about the vast majority of the Bible being accepted right away.